Guys, in this video, we take on the overwhelming project of restoring, rebuilding, and improving upon my father's legendary Corvette. We are transplanting a late model PCM into a earlier small block Chevy engine. Now we're talking an ultra late LS processor with a 6-speed automatic, and hopefully we can get the tap shift working. Now this car has a very rich history. This car has been in a bunch of different magazines. It's won the first 2 Vet Viper shootouts and got runner-up in the 3rd one. Now, this car had run 10s naturally aspirated at full weight back in the 90s. We're talking like 95, 6, 7. Amazing accomplishments for what it was at the time. Had some really cutting edge technology with what it is. It's so easy to do that nowadays, but back then, with the limited stuff of what my father did, absolutely amazing. Now guys, my father died when I was 18 years old, which was right in 2000. And ever since then, I had been tuning right after my father passed away to help support my family. So this car does mean a lot to me. I hope you guys really enjoy this video. That would be so sick. So tap shift that we could integrate through the factory PCM would be so sick.
Yeah, people like that. So we'll try to take advantage of that.
Heck yeah. That's monstrous, man.
Yeah.
And you're working through a lot of things here, and we discovered a couple things that we need to change up, but all in all, our EFI connection wiring harness and our conversion, we got to go through because, again, we have to adapt, a number of other things that are with this particular package that is unique and work with what they have.
Because it is kind of a vintage and a small block car, we're not really sold on the fact that we're going to stare at the coil packs yet. So we might relocate them. So we might.
I don't want to look at them.
Yeah. No, it's nobody really wants to look at coil packs too much if you can help it. So we'll probably open up the harness a little bit and lay back the coil pack drop so we can do something perhaps low.
Maybe something in there or over there underneath the brake boosters.
Somewhere that's just not screaming, "Hey, check me out."
So on my C5 we relocated, my C6 we relocated them. When it came to trying to be showy and a little bit nicer, yeah, I totally agree, 100%. Next thing is we got to figure out what we're going to do with our distributor and how to close all that off, and
because
we got to get a signal off of that.
In case the kids don't know, but the olden small blocks, the distributor actually ran the oil pump. So if you take out the distributor, you kind of take out an important thing there.
We're going to need that oil pump.
I think this is all going to work out well. We're going to be able to take advantage of some of the factory systems. We're going to add like our own fuel system. We're not going to rely on any of the wiring because they didn't have big monster fuel pumps back in the day. So we'll upgrade things like that. We'll get this thing solid.
Awesome, man. Well, we're going to check back with you in a little while here and see how you're doing, but knocking it out, man. Thank you much.
It's been cleaning time. So it came in this morning. We got the oil pan, checking fitment on the gaskets, got it clean, got the windage tray put back in it. The adapters for the valve covers, they were both had the silicone on them. These have nice rubber gaskets in them. They're sealed and they're tight. I'm gonna go ahead and just wipe them down with that acetone on the gasket before putting it together, see if that revives it, and try to run them again because they never had any leaking issues. Intake's done. I've got a few of the valve cover bolts just soaking, and the motor. Cleaned up everything on the deck surface. If you notice, this is interesting. So we've got holes that are filled and studs. So we're only using 6 on the sides, front and rear, 10 bolts for the oil pan on this thing. It is definitely a custom deal. And this is something that's interesting too on this motor. The dipstick tube hole has been blocked off because now it is part of the oil pan. I think this oil pan's had a couple of different revisions. It's got plugs in the bottom of it to access the studs on the side of the block. I'm gonna go ahead and seal up the corners of the front and rear main caps, lay the gasket on there, make sure everything looks good with the gasket, and then we'll get it on, and the next step is setting it in the car. So as you can see, getting the oil pan on with nuts inside the oil pan is a little bit of a pain. You gotta have vertical to do it so you're not just dropping stuff in the motor. Can't get a magnet in there too easy. Oil pan's on, and hopefully it doesn't leak. That's the goal in any kind of oil pan installation. All right, let's get the engine hoist out. I got the motor flipped over, got the engine stand out, and gonna get it hooked up and see if we can drop this guy in there. Alright, well, the motor's back in legend. Can't wait to hear this thing breathe some fire again. Went in pretty easy, other than its hot as could be. I need to find a nut for the motor mount bolt on that side. It was not in the baggie. Under those stairs, I think there's a 6L80 I need to dig out, and we're gonna see how it fits. Just set some stuff on there to make it closed up. Keep it cleaner. Looks good.
Well, fellas, Matt has been tearing some stuff up. Well, actually, not really tearing stuff up. You've been
the opposite of it.
putting things back together, and it really is getting a lot better in here. And right around here, a lot less spaghetti. We've got the engine in there. A little later, we're going to try and get the intake manifold, injectors, all that stuff ready, throttle body and stuff.
Parts are definitely coming together. Now that we have the engine in here, it gives us an obvious point of where things are going instead of just like the engine compartment. So we got our factory bulkhead is all hollowed out, and we got the engine harness coming through at right about the right distance where it starts to lay over and turn into the H pattern really well. Brought out our cooling fan triggers. We're going to use factory fan in its stock location. We're going to give you an auxiliary drop.
Okay.
Just in case, you know, we need something else, or if you guys want to turn to a tran cooler, you know, just because the ECU we're putting into this has the dual fan output, so it'd be silly for us not to take advantage of it.
For sure.
Once I just do a quick pin test, I think a lot of this can go back together. We have our drops for like our coolant temperature sensor, our oil temperature, and all this is the stuff just to run the gauges. You know, oil temps in the back, oil pressure's up here. And that's really taking care of a lot of just what's going to make the dashboard work.
As we're going through this, we're coming across different things that we kind of didn't know that we necessarily had to do. So one of the things was, hey, we need to run a Dakota Digital RPM or TAC output.
The LS engines are all, you know, 4 pulse per revolution, where this is going to be like that old school, every time the coil hit, it would drive it. So we just need a simple box to go from 4 to 8 pulses per revolution. Pretty straightforward.
And now we did mention a little bit about the distributor, but we're working on a solution for that. I think we got an MSD distributor that we're looking at, and it's
something that'll be nice low profile back there, and basically just do what we need to do and drive the oil pump. Our LS coolant sensor kind of grafted into the spot where the original, this was an L98, right? It wasn't even an LT. Yeah, this
correct.
Is back in the day. So yeah, that's where the original computer sensor was. So we're going to stick here because there's good coolant flow between the heads and the thermostat and everything.
Yeah, so Laz and I were actually talking about this a little earlier. Well, we didn't have it drilled and tapped for the factory LS sensor. So we had to have a brass adapter that was pipe thread, and that's what he was working on a little bit earlier. But yeah, it's a little hard to see, but that is one of those small little things that we did have to do in order to be able to make that work.
Little things we'll have to overcome. We're getting some knock sensor adapters.
Yeah.
They're going to take place of where the coolant drain plugs in the side of the block go. So that's actually really similar to where the LS sensors live on an LS block. We'll have to kind of figure out how we're going to tie into for a map sensor signal.
That's the old style.
Yeah, this
and
is like,
I was really, It should have the same 0 to 5 volt, but I personally, I kind of just want to have...
Unless you knew the scaling for this, and I'm sure somebody else really does, I'd prefer, you know, just for ease.
Thank you. That's kind of what I wanted to do. Like the LS sensor that goes and belongs there with the correct plug. I mean, these are the little things that we're running into. The knock sensor adapters, we're getting those from EFI Connection, which is the company that we got all this wiring harness from. They've got a ton of different things that they supply or that they can make for this type of, you know, adaptation. So we're definitely glad that they had that, because we were actually thinking about, I was like, well, knock sensors, we're gonna run around race gas,
No, it's actually a really nice adapter. It would have taken us a bunch of time to modify an MPT port and put a stud on it, and it's just way easier to click and send and ship, and it's here.
This is certainly not like your just typical, hey, we're doing heads and cam on an LS. We've done that a whole bunch of times. Everything, we know exactly where it is. This is a lot of tedious changing of outputs and inputs in different locations, and this doesn't fit. So a lot of this is just, it's gonna take some time, and we definitely thank you guys for hanging in there and watching all this. It's quite an adventure for us. A little later today, we're gonna try and test fit the trans in there and see what we got to be able to do. So that's a big moment right there. There's so many bridges that we're gonna end up crossing as we go through there, so figuring that out as we go. You had an interesting idea about taking the tail shaft out of the 6L80, kind of like what you had done on your truck, and thinking that you could build some sort of deal off the back of that.
Yeah, using the 4-wheel drive adapter between the 6L80 and transfer case, using that adapter, and then buildings off of that, rather than just using that real small tail shaft housing that comes on it, since you could put the internal seal inside the, or on the back of the adapter on the trans.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty fascinating, but that's going to be something that we're just going to have to figure out. You know, we're going to have to stick it up in there and find out what the deal is. But I mean, I think that that's probably a better solution, because we have a ladder bar that has to attach, and we're going to have to cut up the ladder bar.
That ladder bar is, you know, instead of having a cross member, you have to have that ladder bar in there solid, and it, you know, it sets your pinion angle on your end and also holds up the tail shaft of the trans.
And one of the things that's really different about this setup, though, is the fact that this is a plastic car. It's fiberglass. It does not have anything that you can just, hey, we're gonna weld a trans mount to right here. It doesn't work that way. It'll just pull right through. It's definitely a different deal. We'll get in there a little bit and we'll test our different solutions, see what happens. As long as we've been dealing with the Legend here, we've had a few issues with the fueling. Sometimes it was absolutely perfect, sometimes it was erratic. Thank you for dealing with that.
Yeah, we ran a one-piece fuel wire this time instead of the multiple, where, you know, any joint could be probably in the worst possible spot. So yeah, we took all of those variables out of the table, ran a dedicated 12 gauge, something that should stand the test of time and actually
Very nice.
We modded the fuse box that came with the engine harness so we could get switched power, so we could do stuff like that tack adapter, possibly the CAN bus stuff, just giving us a little expansibility further down the road, so when we do want to add things, it'll be easy instead of having to tear everything back apart and
classy.
Tie some wires in. So it's already done.
Think ahead of the game.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's weird. We're usually just dealing with it.
Just take care of it when it needs it. So just a little bit of future proofing it.
Learn something every day here. So yeah, we got a flex fuel 2, which is honestly a really, really cool thing to say. We got flex fuel in a 1987 Corvette and paddle shift. Not yet. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm thinking ahead.
That's on the hopes and dreams wish list. We can take care of that. There's definitely some stuff out there we can get ourselves like true paddle shift, but hopefully we can do it without the wireless stuff, because that's just like a bad keyless entry.
Bad keyless entry.
Yeah, no, dude. It was wireless, and you push the button, and then a second later, like, you hear the click. And that's
I don't want that.
That's never going to work.
I don't want that.
Any competition. I know, you know, we've gone into a perfectly good wire harness and kind of undressed it and everything, but you know, in order to do things kind of the right way, you know, you got to get directly to the pins, so we can just take it directly there instead of splicing stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had to customize it a little bit beyond what we already had. I mean, what they had was a great product, but we, again, we're customizing to exactly what we want.
Fine-tuning it to our needs. One of the major things, once we get that tach converter in there, we'll run the tachometer and the speedometer through it in case we just need some easy adjustability. And then, yeah, we can really start buttoning this one up.
Let's take a look at this, man. So Laz got the injectors, throttle body on there.
I didn't want to tie him up with too much room back here, so I just made this where it's just sitting here.
That's perfect.
So we can run the wires to the right length.
Yep.
And
we'll get an idea of what we're doing. Laz drilled and tapped the back of this manifold so we could use the LS3 map sensor, so it's just a no-brainer to tune. We know all the specs of that. So just nice and clean. I like it.
The pigtail for the throttle body ordered.
Yep, that's showing up.
Probably tomorrow.
Every minute we work on this, it's looking better and better. So
yeah, no, absolutely, man. Definitely coming together quick. Hey guys, wanted to come at you with a real quick tech tip. This is something that we do in order to make a little bit more power, and a lot of small little things like that. You do those a couple times, they add up to a lot of power. This right here is called Mylar, and what we're doing is we're putting a quick little heat barrier. I mean, this is literally a $1 piece of stuff that you can get at Home Depot. Cut it to size, put some tape on there, and we stick it underneath the intake manifold. So we're gonna keep heat transmission from getting from the valve cover to the bottom of the intake manifold, but we're gonna go one farther. I just cut this piece right here, and I'm gonna get this guy on there, try and block off any heat that we can get to the intake manifold. Now what that does is that you can actually see an appreciable difference of power by keeping the intake air temperatures down lower. Now that's not just intake air temperature that is entering the motor, but it does heat up by the time it gets to the back of the valve. And again, that does translate into actual power. Hope this helps you guys out. You can put this on all sorts of different parts and components that get a little bit warm.
All right, this is our mock-up 6L80. I'm gonna get it in there again. We've had it in there one time before just to roughly check before we pulled the motor out to see if it would fit. I'm gonna get it put in there this time, get some bolts in it, and start figuring out how to configure the cross member, well, the lack of cross member to the torque arm, I believe it's called. Might be wrong on that, but we'll get some bell housing bolts started, and this guy sets the pinion angle on the diff. Just sitting there, no bolts in it. And we got to attach it to the back here. So we talked about earlier possibly using the adapter housing. That was on a truck two-wheel drive train, so I don't know if it'll work on this one, but we'll see what we can come up with.
Let's take a knee.
On this play, we're going to try to make a 6L80 fit in a C4.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like standing back looking at it, like ground clearance, doesn't look like it's going to be an issue. It's not like this thing's a lowrider.
Yeah, so we had a guy that was nearby that had a shop with a 10-speed in it, and I didn't really know this, but yeah, I had major ground clearance issues.
Well, do you remember the 6090 and the 4th-gen Camaro where we had to mod the pan?
Yeah, I do remember that.
But I think we're going to get lucky on this one.
All right.
As far as that goes.
Yeah. This next part, though, a little different. All right, so we got to be able to mount to here. So realistically, we need to copy whatever that flange is, probably build something like that onto our ladder bar. Kind of similar.
I brought some Jeep parts. This would be the 4-wheel drive adapter, which holds into that location. Now, my thought pattern is we can build something off of here to actually go into the section. And that'll give us something more to work with, more substantial to work with than just trying to work off of that little flange.
Yeah, because that, I don't know, that has a lot more meat to it.
Whether we need to build a second piece that bolts to this, if that'd be sufficient, or just have something made out of one piece. Steve at LOJ has already kind of been creative on one of these for the four-wheel drive stuff for the manual to the transfer case.
Yeah.
So he's got some experience with it. We can talk to him. Look at the header location. That looks like we're gonna be okay.
That might be really tight towards the end though.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have to modify the white pipe. Other side, no problem.
So, as long as the other header doesn't kick in for any reason, I think they go out pretty straight.
Yeah, white pipe, we're probably gonna have to squeeze this guy and maybe turn it into a little bit of an oval, because that did have a nice smooth area right there. And
that's not being able to hook the lack of
yeah, there's nothing that we can hook to right here because this is all fiberglass.
This is a little bit of steel that's actually front to back on this car is underneath that bench weld. So that's all there is for that to go. We'll stick with the factory setup and try to make it work.
We gotta tie it all together.
I'd like to get something to go across here just so I can leave the trans in there and get the tranny jack out of here so we can still go up and down with the car, get the wires right into the transmission where they need to go. So I'm gonna have to figure out something with that even if I go from the lift arms. Worst case scenario. All right.
So many things to think about. We got to talk to Circle D about a converter. Really looking forward to getting this thing done, but we've got a lot of different steps to go, but we're knocking them out step by step, piece by piece.
Oh, here he goes again.
Day by day.
So while Jeremy was tuning, I solved the crossmember problem. We're gonna call it the X member. I just thought it was funny looking. We can actually lower the car down now and continue with the wiring to the transmission. And while we're working on these other problems, so just needed to have the trans in the car to basically get clearance for exhaust and everything else. That's the solution. Couple ratchet straps and a 2x4.
To be honest, I don't remember how we came across this, but we came across this weird idea. And it was kind of like, look, the 5.3 is an amazing power plant, it'll take boost, do all this other stuff. I mean, the power that we've been able to make, even on our S10, at the amount of boost that we're making, kind of, if we rewind it real quick here, it makes sense that that thing is making 500 wheel horsepower naturally aspirated. Now that's incredible. Now, why is that?
Good head.
Absolutely. So we sat down and we were like, dude, how can we get an LT 5.3 mashup? You know, basically, can we put an LT 5.3 head on an LS? And so we started looking into it. Show us some of the stuff of what we would be up against.
We're trying to prove that GM has mod motors too.
Honestly, dude, the GM LS is more modular than Ford's mod motor ever was.
Well, we know the LT crank works in the LS block.
Yes, we do.
And it's a factory modular forged crank. So it's already stronger than 99% of the LS cranks out there. Except it's enabled flange is the only thing on the back, so you use LSA flex plate on it.
Dude, freaking wizard
this is top secret
stuff. This is
actually,
wizard
we shouldn't even be talking about that. Looking at the bolt patterns.
So that's LS, this is the LT.
Automatically, we're missing a few up here on the LT. We do have the outers. We got the regular ones around there. Just check it out.
So the dowel's a little bit bigger on the LS.
We got a different location on the
okay.
So the LT runs the dowels up there. The LS runs the dowels down here. We do have a bridge port.
Yeah, we can do that.
If you just open it up, relocate this. So let's see, look, we'd have to relocate this bolt hole to be a dowel to index the head, where this one's just gonna have a little bit of space around it. Not gonna hurt anything. What about all the steam ports? 3-point steam port here. The LS only has 2, but we're looking at that 3-point right there on the LT, but the LT head doesn't have. It's only using these 2. So this third one there, the Siamese cylinder port, like the old school 400,
yeah,
we don't need it.
One other thing, when we look at this head, it's so obvious to see that this thing flows so much more. I mean, that is very serious. And this is a cathedral style head. This one is ported. And it does flow. This guy is just gigantic comparatively. It's got a bigger valve. And when we started to look at this here, we found another thing. You know, this was, some of this we knew and some of it we didn't really know offhand, but check this out. As we looked at this LS head, the intake goes that side, the exhaust there. Intake goes this side and the exhaust goes this way. And it actually is directing in that fashion. So that was really, really interesting. And we were like, well, wait a minute, if that's that,
then our exhaust
then
lobe is going to open the intake.
Intake's
Intake
gonna
lobe is going to open the
open-
exhaust. So, custom grind cam.
Yes, which led us to something. We actually just got a contact that we're probably going to try and pursue and see if we can make this happen. This would be a very, very fascinating, super high output 5.3. And with port injection, there's some other intake manifold things that we can also do as well. So let's also look at the camshafts, because that leads us to that next. Before we get I get a little ahead of myself. I got a little excited.
These are two factory cams. Not really worried about the condition of them, so they're on the table.
That guy's the LT, and that has the fuel lobe right there. It's also a little longer.
It is a little longer. The bearing that this rides in is really wide, though.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if we're getting a custom grind cam, I think they can work with us. So everything else is lined up as far as the lobe location. And you gotta remember, to do a DOD delete on a LT motor, we're using LS lifter trays, LS lifters. The stuff's already swapping over.
Yeah, so LS7 lifters will go right in an LT, and that's kind of like a standard upgrade for whenever you're ditching DOD or whatever. So
This cutout on the cam is for the cam phasing, for the valve on the cam sprocket. So that's not needed. So it looks like cam can be made to happen pretty easily.
So if we have an LS1 core, but we do the intake and exhaust in the sequence of the LT, that's what it would take in order to make that happen, which is pretty exciting. Now, another thing too is that the LT1 intake manifold is kind of sucky. Dude, I'm like sitting here, I've been like doing this dance this whole time we've been on here. There's actually been 5 I counted while I was on camera and you were talking. The LT1 intake manifold, quite honestly, is poop. Now, they do have, the fast manifold is an awesome manifold. However, there is a method of what you can do. You can adapt the LS7 intake manifold to an LT, which would be sick.
When you look at the ports,
that's a 7-liter manifold, that is big bad boy.
Everything on even the 5.3 LT heads, it's got remnants of an LS7 size to it.
It does. It really is kind of a brother cousin.
You've looked into the flow numbers of these heads, right?
Yeah, and I can't remember honestly. I mean, they're over 300 and something like stock.
They were up there.
Yeah. And a ported LS will get to 300, but out of the box 300. And if we have a better intake manifold to begin with, those numbers are going to carry.
You can't run an LS3 head or an LS7 head on a 5.3 because your valves are going to hit your bores.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why certain things will or will not work, but this seemed to be the most exciting possibility, and it's not going to be easy, or probably isn't going to be that cheap either, but it would be incredible output.
The accessory drive's not just going to bolt on. I can't just go and throw these heads on my truck.
Right, yeah.
So,
yeah, we would have to do something with that. However, it would be pretty cool to have an LS 5.3 with a LT4 blower right there. That would be pretty sick. Stay tuned. So ICT Billet makes an adapter here such that you can bolt this guy on, and then you could be able to put on an LS7 intake manifold to that. And the LS7 intake manifold is a 7-liter manifold, the biggest, baddest flowing one for a stock application. 7-liter displacement that turns 7,000 RPM, still makes really good power. You put a fast manifold on that, it does improve it, but it's really pretty hard. So we know that that is honestly the best factory manifold. It would be crazy to see that.
Yeah, something else we're going to have to work with too is the 1/8 ratio on the rockers instead of the 1/7.
Yeah.
And then the offset rocker instead of them all being the same. There's like a bunch of little tiny stuff. It's like slightly different but can be made to work.
Definitely some food for thought. Hey guys, we know you could be anywhere, but we thank you so much for spending your time and hanging out with us. Guys, I cannot tell you how proud and how excited I am to actually see this thing coming back together. This has been something that I honestly never thought we could even be able to do something like this. So the possibilities are absolutely incredible, man. So looking forward to pushing this project farther and farther. I cannot wait to be able to run a better time than my father did with just a little bit better technology, and hopefully we get a lot better drivability out of it as well. Huge thanks to EFI Connection, ICT Billet for a lot of their help, and also all the guys at Holley for making some miracles happen. Guys, we so appreciate your support, and what you guys have done with merch sales helps us be able to make better and better content like what we were trying to do here. So share your support for Fasterproms. Check out our merch. Definitely helps us along. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We will see you next episode. God bless you guys. Stay tuned.